Howdy and hello everyone, I'm 5008 Creations and you're the viewer, and I'm a rail fan. And with this hobby of going out and filming very large metal boxes that move, there are many do's and don'ts that if you don't follow, you will basically get publicly executed on literally every single Railfan server, channel, post, etc. And it usually goes a little something like this. Breaking news! Foamiest Foaming Womer films train like an absolute idiot! As was said and shown there, if you want to be in the Railfan community and not get torn to shreds by 90% of it, you've come to the right place, as I'm well experienced in how not to get called a foamer most of the time. So, let's get started, shall we? Don't use an iPad for any reason. Starting off with one pretty well known here, do not film with an iPad. I know that usually it's actually pretty easy to film with one if you have one and you don't have a phone, but having an iPad is the #1 best way in the Railfan community to immediately get associated with this term called foamer, which I will touch on later. In the Railfan community, the express route to losing any future credibility you have is filming with an iPad. You could literally be the best Railfan ever, and if you walk into a station with an iPad, everyone will avoid you to literally any extent. And it's not even like filming with an iPad gives you bad footage or anything. It's literally just because people who film with iPads have been associated entirely with some of the most cliche foamers that exist in the entirety of the Railfan community. Again, I'll get over to that term. Do get a tripod. Now, getting a tripod is one that's a little bit less strict, because I do know a good few Railfanners who actually do record without a tripod and just record with their phone in their hand or something, and actually post rather good Railfanning content. However, if you just have a camera that you're recording with, be sure to always record with the camera, or else you're going to get some extremely shaky shots that are going to look absolutely garbage. And I must reiterate the point with cameras. If you don't have a tripod and you have a camera you're recording with, you will get an extremely shaky shot that you can barely see, even if it has a stabilizer. Now, if you have an extremely shaky shot, you're going to get for sure torn up as soon as you even talk about anyone else's work. Like, genuinely, if your shot doesn't look like this or this, it's best to keep your mouth shut about other people's work for the time being. Don't abuse a spot. Okay, I will admit this one is a bit more do as I say, not as I do, because I have too many videos from Old Town and Carlsbad, but a great way to get torn apart in the community is going to a spot again and again and again and again and again and again. Now, of course, there are some exceptions, mainly for your local stop. For example, my two local stops are Santa Fe Depot and Old Town, so naturally I have a good few shots from both of those places. But if you're going out of your way to go to a spot just because, that's a way to indirectly call yourself unoriginal in many people's eyes, especially if that spot is one used by many other people. Do be original with where you film. This one sort of ties into the last point, where always go to a spot that either no one goes to, or one that looks absolutely scrumptious, or just always go to them to the best of your ability. For me, those spots turned out to be good old Rose Canyon and Miramar, along with Del Mar and Torrey Pines. If you notice, all of these spots are not stations. This is because, unless a station is just deserted by Railfans for one reason or another, they usually will end up getting lost in the hundreds of other station shots. Personally, I like nature shots mainly with mountains, but of course you can go for whatever you like with your shot. Don't be a foamer. And now we've gone to the point that most of you watching this video probably expected me to talk about at some point. What is and how not to be a foamer? Because of the Railfan community's unrestrained levels of toxicity, the term foamer is basically just turned into calling someone stupid and annoying. But to my understanding, being a foamer usually means you do one or more of the following: screaming excessively during someone else's shot, effectively ruining the audio of said shot, standing in front of someone's shot, waving or jumping around like crazy when a train comes, worse when you do this in someone's shot, going absolutely insane over something, extremely common that in reality is nowhere near rare, and doing most of the things I said not to do previously in this video. Now, of course, there are more or less things based off of who you ask, but overall, this is pretty much what being a foamer boils down to. Basically, the most effective way not to be a foamer is just don't do this, and you'll probably be fine. Stupid conclusion. Overall, though, the Railfanning community is pretty much just a community about people recording, liking, and talking about trains. And whenever I see people arguing or roasting people over this sort of stuff, I sometimes like to just step back and realize that a lot of this stuff is really kind of overblown these days, especially with how many new Railfanners are popping up and how many of them people seem to not really tolerate too much. But if there's one thing any new aspiring Railfans can get from this video, it's just don't be too insane. As even though I would love to be able to see the Railfan community go back to a form that's less toxic and more normal, inevitably, toxicity will never leave, and if you are too insane, you'll probably just get torn apart by 75% of it. You know, it's actually been a hot minute since I checked the local news station, so how about I go and do that now and see what kinds of people are getting roasted these days? I'm like, come on, just look at this guy. Doesn't he look like an absolute idiot? Well, I'm screwed.